Alright, so this is our first video for Honors Algebra 2 in our first unit and our first assignment. And what we're going to be learning today is, or reviewing, is how to solve various types of equations. And that involves proportions, equations with fractions, with variables on both sides, and even literal equations. And then we're also going to apply equations to different situations in order to answer a question. And that's what our homework is going to be about as well today. So let's go ahead and get started. First equation involves equations with variables on both sides of the equation. And so if you're in class, I would have you do this at your desks or in your groups. But if you're watching this at home, then I would prefer you just to kind of stop the video, pause, and see if you can solve this equation before we go ahead and do it together. Hopefully you've been able to do that. If not, let's go ahead and solve this together and see if we can come up with the correct answer together. The first thing we'd want to do is simplify both sides. So I'm going to start here on the left by using the distributive property. 2 times 3y is 6y, and then 2 times negative 9 is negative 18, minus the 9, and that can simplify to 6y minus 27. On the right-hand side, I can also use the distributive property. I would take 5 times y is 5y, minus 5 times 3 is minus 15, and then we have the minus 2y plus 6. Well, we can combine like terms on this side. 5y minus the 2y is 3y, and negative 15 plus 6 is negative 9. So we have 6y minus 27 equals 3y minus 9. So then I want to get the y's on the same side of the equation. So I'm going to subtract 3y from both sides here. Here the 3y's cancel out. That's nothing, 0y. But 6y minus 3y is 3y. I'm going to also add 27 to both sides. So the 27's cancel out. Negative 27 plus 27 is 0. But negative 9 plus 27 is 18. And then when you divide both sides by 3, we get our final answer of y equals 6. That's what I'd like for you to have on your paper as you do your homework assignment. You should be showing your work on a piece of paper, but then entering your answer in Math Excel, which is what our first assignment is going to be in. So there we go. Our first answer is y equals 6. So we've got 4 of these problems to work through, different kinds of problems, just to get you going before you get to your homework assignment. So that was equations with variables on both sides. So now we're going to solve equations that involve fractions. A lot of people don't like fractions. They're not comfortable working with them. And here we have a complicated, it looks like a complicated equation that has 3 fractions on the left-hand side. You could go ahead and get a common denominator and add those fractions together. But one thing that I want you to be aware of is that you can get rid of all the fractions in a problem by multiplying by the least common denominator. What does 2, 3, and 6 all go into? Well, they all go into 6. They're all the least common factor, the greatest common factor is 6. So what I'm going to do is take this entire equation and multiply everything by 6. So when I take 6 times x over 2, well, that's the same thing as 3x, because the 6 over 2 is 3. 6 times x over 3, well, that's 2x. 6 times x over 6, well, that's just x. And then 6 times 4, well, that's 24. So on the left-hand side, we have 3x plus 2x plus 1x, well, that's 6x equals 24. And if I divide both sides by 6, then I get that x is 4. And there we go, x is 4. We could plug 4 back into the equation to make sure that it works. If I plugged in 4 here, I would have 4 over 2, which is 2. 4 over 3, well, that's 1 1/3. And then 4 over 6 is 2/3. So we have the 1/3 and the 2/3, that makes 1, plus this 1, that's 2, plus this 2, that makes a total of 4. So we know we're doing it correct. So that's an example of solving equations that involve fractions. You're going to have different kinds of equations like this in your homework assignment. Let's take a look at a situation that we have to set up an equation to solve. So let's take a look at this problem here. We have 2 buses that leave Houston at the same time and travel in opposite directions. One bus travels 10 miles per hour faster than the other. So you might remember these from Algebra 1, but we are going with this general equation, distance equals rate times time. And so what we do is we have bus number 1 here, and let's say we call this bus number 2 here. One travels in one direction and the other travels in the other direction. But we know that their total distance after 4 hours is 480 miles apart. In other words, the distance for bus 1 plus the distance for bus 2 eventually is going to be 480 miles apart. But what I'm going to do is replace their distances with rate times time. In other words, the rate times the time for the first bus plus the rate times the time for the second bus will eventually be 480. Well, do we know the rate or the time? Well, the rate we know is that one goes 10 miles per hour faster than the other one. So let's say the first bus goes X miles per hour. Let's say the second bus is the one that goes 10 miles per hour faster. Well, that rate is going to be X plus 10. So we have the two rates of the two buses, at least an expression for both of them. Do we know the times for the two buses? Well, it says in 4 hours they're going to be 480 miles apart. That means the time for both of them is 4. So we have the rate times the time, that's X times 4 for the first bus. The rate times time for the second bus, that's X plus 10 times 4, eventually equals 480. So here we have an equation. Probably better looking would be something like this. Instead of X times 4, I'm going to write that as 4X. And then I'm going to distribute this 4 kind of backwards. 4 times X is another 4X. 4 times 10 is 40. And that equals 480. Well, 4X plus 4X is 8X. I'm going to subtract 40 from both sides. So that means 8X equals 440. And then I would divide both sides by 8. So let's see. I know that 400 divided by 8 is 50. 40 divided by 8 is 5, so one X value, one bus goes 55 miles per hour. That's this one. That's bus number 1. Now we said bus number 2 is the one that goes 10 miles per hour faster. So if I plug 50 in for this X, that's going to be, or 55 in for this X, that's going to be 55 plus 10, which is 65 miles per hour. So the two buses go, one goes 55 miles per hour and the other is 65 miles per hour. And that means that in 4 hours, they're going to be 480 miles apart. So not only are we solving equations, but here we're writing an equation so that we can answer specific questions. Let's move on. One more. This is an example of a literal equation. A literal equation is an equation where we can solve for a specific variable, but it doesn't give us a number, a numerical answer like 12 or 13. It's just going to give us another expression. So we're going to solve this equation for W. And so I have two W's here. I want to make that one W. So the first thing that I'm going to do is put parentheses around these two expressions with the W involved. And I'm going to factor a W out. So I'm going to write this as, this is W times A plus B. We know that if we distributed this, W times A would be AW, W times B would be BW. So we're just going to write it with a single W if we factor the W out. Minus the 7 equals 15. So then I can add 7 to both sides. So I'm going to have W times A plus B equals 22. Well, then I want to get rid of the multiplying by A plus B, so I'm going to divide by A plus B. And if I divide both sides by A plus B, here these cancel. And W equals 22 over A plus B. Now here the solution to this problem is not really a number. It's not a numerical response. It's just another expression. But we have that W is equal to 22 over A plus B. These are the type of things that you're going to be doing on your homework assignment. I don't expect you to get them all correct. It'd be great if you did. But we want you to work on the 15 questions on your homework assignment for tonight. We'll go over questions that you have first thing tomorrow. But you can also use Math Excel, use the tutorials in Math Excel to help you with some of the ones that you might have trouble with. Good luck on this assignment. It's your first one, and we will see you tomorrow.